After a remarkable day across South Australia, including a statewide blackout, emergency officials are warning residents are in for another day of wild weather.
Yeah, full emergency conditions, Brooke, remaining in place after South Australian Police declared a code black last night. This is the latest as we have it for you this morning. South Australia bracing for a second day of severe weather with heavy rain and destructive winds to lash large parts of the state.
Power's been restored to most of the Adelaide metro area. This is after winds have ripped those 22 transmission towers from the ground, and that blacked out the entire state. Northern parts of the state and the Eyre Peninsula are likely to be without power supply for most of the day, though. More wild weather on the way. As we've been reporting this morning, there is a risk of flooding along the west coast of Eyre Peninsula and Port Pirie. The storm front now moving into Victoria too, which is going to bring some very heavy rain and powerful winds there.
Joining us live now is the Minister for Energy and the Environment, Josh Frydenberg. Minister, thanks for your time. You've been critical of the power mix in South Australia, particularly the reliance on wind energy. But the fundamental question to you this morning is, did the green energy have anything to do with the power outage yesterday?
Well, the advice to me from the Australian Energy Market Operator is that what occurred in South Australia was due to the extreme weather conditions. It was a once-in-a-50-year event. There were 80,000 lightning strikes last night in South Australia. There was also cyclonic winds. This led to transmission towers going down, as well as a lightning strike on a power station. We also saw the interconnectors immediately shut down to protect themselves. Now, that is one question as to why there was a cascading effect across the system and the whole state, 1.7 million residents being left without power. But at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, when we pursue these renewable energy targets, what is the impact on stability? What is the impact on price? How is that transition occurring? And some of these states, like South Australia, have very high renewable energy targets, 50% by 2025. They're currently at 40%. That's nearly higher than anywhere else, not only across the nation, but in the world.
But the Premier says that it would have happened regardless of the power mix. Even if that Port Augusta coal-fired power station was still up, which was closed by Alinta earlier in the year, that the outages would have still occurred. Is he right in saying that?
Well, there are two different issues. The advice to me from AEMO is that this was a weather event, so it wasn't related to the type of generation of power and whether that was wind or whether that was gas. At the same time, there are serious questions for the future of this energy system about how do we combine energy policy and climate policy. How do we keep the lights on? Because that's our first and foremost responsibility as ministers. Stability of the system, because you can't have a situation like last night where so many people were denied power. There was gridlock on the streets. There was people stuck in elevators. There was backup generators having to be provided to the hospitals, and clearly that is not good enough going forward. That's why
So are you saying that the backup could have been more effective if it wasn't so reliant on the green energy, that if you did have a different type of baseload power supply, that they would have been able to have a better plan B?
That's not what I'm saying, because we don't have that information yet, and I'll wait for the detailed report. But what I'm saying is there are real questions for the future of the national electricity market as to how do we make this transition effectively. You see, energy security has been in focus and will now come into sharper focus for all concerned. I know the Prime Minister has spoken to Jay Weatherill. I have spoken to the Energy Minister of South Australia, both here last night as well as this morning. We're all committed to the same thing, which is energy security, but we also need to think about affordability as we transition to a lower emissions future.
So fundamentally it could be just a coincidence here that South Australia is the most aggressive state in terms of pursuing renewables, but they're also the state that faced a statewide blackout last night and yesterday.
Well, in technical terms, what they talk about has occurred in South Australia is islanding, where the state got removed from the rest of the grid. So one of the questions we have to look at is how do we get more interconnectors, Kieran, between the various states so that supply can reach, in this case, South Australia from other states. And I know they're talking about an interconnector from New South Wales because there's already two between Victoria and South Australia.
Now, Mike Rann, the former South Australian Premier, had promised an interconnector to be built between South Australia and New South Wales. That never eventuated. If there was that capacity yesterday, in conjunction with the interconnector to Victoria, would we have seen power stay up?
Well, again, they're going to be technical questions that we will ask of AEMO as the energy market operator, and that will be all dealt with in the aftermath of what occurred last night. Right now, our focus is on getting the power back for South Australians, 90% of whom now have power. There's obviously real wind and lightning challenges still in South Australia, which is making the emergency services work difficult. But that is our main focus. There'll be plenty of time for the post-mortem, but it will be very, very important to get this right going forward, and that's why I'm calling together the COAG energy ministers as soon as possible to discuss this issue in more detail.
Minister, thanks for the update live from Melbourne this morning.